This is a job for tens of millions of proud people working together from all across the land and from all walks of life, young and old, black and white, Hispanic and Asian, many of whom we have brought together for the very, very first time. If you look at the numbers, if you look at what's happened with Hispanic, with African American, with Asian, and just look at what's happening. This is a party that has become much bigger, much stronger, much more powerful, can do much more good for our country. This is a job for grandmothers and construction workers, firefighters, builders, teachers, doctors, and farmers who cannot stay quiet any longer. You can't stay quiet any longer. You're angry about what's happening to our country. Our country is being destroyed before your very eyes. It's a job for every aspiring young person and every hard-working parent, for every entrepreneur and underappreciated police officer who is ready to shout for safety in America. The police are being treated so badly. These are great people that can straighten out the crime. They're the ones that know how to do it. We have to give them back their respect and their dignity. This will not be my campaign. This will be our campaign all together. Because the only force strong enough to defeat the massive corruption we are up against is you, the American people. It's true. The American people, the greatest people on earth, we love them all. And we love both sides. We're going to bring people together. We're going to unify people. And it was happening in the previous administration, previous to the previous. And what was bringing them together was success. Prior to COVID coming in, the people were calling me, you wouldn't believe it. People that were so far left, I figured they'd never speak to me and I would never speak to them. But our success was so incredible, like never before. And then COVID started coming in from China. We call it the China virus. Some people call it other things. But it was devastating and we built it back and did an incredible job. But when people say Republicans or Democrats or liberals or conservatives, I say we can all get together. And we were doing that. That was happening just prior because the success was greater than this country has ever had. We were leapfrogging China and leapfrogging everybody else, and everybody wanted a piece of it. But just as I promised in 2016, I am your voice. I am your voice. The Washington establishment wants to silence us, but we will not let them do that. What we have built together over the past 6 years is the greatest movement in history because it is not about politics. It's about our love for this great country, America, and we're not going to let it fail. I am running because I believe the world has not yet seen the true glory of what this nation can be. We have not reached that pinnacle, believe it or not. In fact, we can go very far. We're going to have to go far. First, we have to get out of this ditch. And once we're out, you'll see things that nobody imagined for any country. It's called the United States of America, and it's an incredible place. We are Americans, and we do not have to endure what has taken place in Washington, D.C. This is our country, our government, and the corridors of power, they're our corridors. They're not their corridors. These are our corridors. And we are coming to take those corridors back. So from now until Election Day in 2024, which will come very quickly, we'll go, look at how time flies. Look how fast it's all going. I will fight like no one has ever fought before. We will defeat the radical left Democrats that are trying to destroy our country from within and likewise protect us all. We want to protect us. We have to be protected from all of those nations out there that are looking to destroy us from beyond our shores. There are lots of nations that hate us gravely. And that's the problem. When they look at us in disarray like we are right now, when we go to them begging for oil and we have more liquid gold under our feet than they have or any other nation has, and we don't use it because we're going to them, it's crazy what's happening. We can't let it continue. Joe Biden is the face of left-wing failure and Washington corruption. He had a big G20 dinner tonight. Everybody flew over to wherever they flew over, and guess what? He never showed up. They're still looking for him. What's going on? G20, I used to love that, the leaders. I used to make deals for our country like you wouldn't believe. It was one, give me the next one, give me the next one. And we got them to stop taking advantage of our country. Every nation took advantage of our country. We renegotiated deals with Mexico and Canada, USMCA. We got rid of the worst trade deal ever made. NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made. That's why the farmers love Trump, because we did a great job, but manufacturers also. And we did a deal, we restructured our terrible deal with Japan, and I did it with Prime Minister Abe, a great man who unfortunately is so sad. He was a great friend of mine, but a great man, loved his country so much, but we restructured and made it a really terrific deal, and with South Korea and so many other countries. And the best of all was what we did to China. We made an incredible deal, but after COVID, I don't even bother talking about it because the devastation that caused for the entire world was too much to bear. I will ensure that Joe Biden does not receive 4 more years in 2020. Can't do it. Our country could not take that. And I say that not in laughter. I say that in tears. Our country could not take 4 more years. It can only take so much. It's all very fragile to start off with. It can only take so much. In 2020, I received the largest number of votes of any sitting president in history by a lot. And we will do it again, but with even more votes this time. Many have noted that huge gains we have made with Latino voters, and I believe we will set even greater records with this crucial vote in 2024. The Hispanic voter, the Latino voter has been unbelievable. Great people, very entrepreneurial people, and they want security. And everyone thought when I did the wall, I built the wall, and they thought, oh, that would hurt me with the Hispanic vote. No, it helped me because they understood. They wanted safety. They wanted security. And they understood the border better than anybody else. So they were amazed. We started that trend, and now we're continuing with that trend. You look at what we've done in Florida, what everybody's doing now in Florida and Texas, along the border in Texas, won every single community. I won every single community. Governor of Texas called. Great gentleman, just got reelected. And he said to me, I'd like to talk to you for a second. Well, he said, you've done something that nobody else has done. You've won every single area along the border. It's the longest since Reconstruction. I said, Reconstruction? I guess you call that the Civil War? That's what I call it? That's what I call it. Governor Abbott, very good man, and he's working hard, but it's horrible because what's happening is they're just sending hundreds of thousands of people right through his state, right through Arizona, right through all of the states. What's happening is they're coming up all of the states. And we can't have it anymore. This campaign will be about issues, vision, and success, and we will not stop. We will not quit until we've achieved the highest goals and made our country greater than it has ever been before, and we can do that. We can do it. Our victory will be built upon big ideas, bold ambitions, and daring dreams for America's future. We need daring dreams. It is not enough merely to complain or oppose. We don't want to be critics. We don't want to be complainers. I never wanted to be a critic. I never respected critics. They tell people what's wrong, but they can't do it themselves. We will win because we will fight with every measure of our strength and with every ounce of our energy to lift up the working men and working women of America and to restore the fabric of this nation. The radical left Democrats have embraced an extreme ideology of government domination and control. Our approach is the opposite, one based on freedom, values, individual responsibility, and just plain common sense. It's common sense. In 2 years, the Biden administration has destroyed the U.S. economy, just destroyed it. With victory, we will again build the greatest economy ever. It will take place quickly. We will build the greatest economy ever. And if you remember, I did it twice. I did it before COVID and then handed off something where the stock market was higher than just prior to COVID coming in. And we did it twice, and we will do it again, but this time we'll do it bigger, stronger, better than anybody can even imagine. And one of the beautiful things of the pause, if there is such a thing as a beautiful thing, but one of the important factors of the pause is that we see how bad they've done. So we will be able to do it properly, and it will be much easier. Everybody will agree with us because everybody sees what a bad job has been done during this 2-year period, and it will be a 4-year period. Everybody sees that. It will be much easier for us to do what has to be done. We will immediately tackle inflation and bring down to a level that it was. You know, we were at 0, but actually the best number is 1%. Do you know that? You don't want it really 0. But we were at 0. We actually got it to exactly 1%, the perfect number. One thing every economist agrees, don't have it 0, have it like at 1%. They even say 1 to 2, but I said, let's do 1. And we had it at 1%, and we had it there for a long period of time, and we had the value of the dollar. We had it so that this country could make a lot of money. And I fought other countries where they devalued their dollar or they devalued their currency, whether it was the pound or whether it was the yuan or the yen. And I used to fight like cats and dogs with the leaders of other countries because they were stealing from us. When they did that, they had artificial devaluations of their currency. It's a very important thing. I haven't even heard it mentioned in 2 years. That's a very important thing. It's very hard for us to compete when they do that artificially. And they had to pay a big price when they did it. And they never really did it for very long. I said, we're not going to do business with you anymore as a country. And they believed me. And they let it go back up. Instead of putting America last, as the Biden administration has done very, very openly and bravely, because I can't imagine saying, let's put America last. I think it takes courage. We will again put America first. Every policy. Thank you very much. We do love our country, isn't it? That's why we're here. I didn't need this. I had a very nice, easy life. This is something I didn't need, and a lot of you people don't need either, but we love our country. We have to take care of our country. We have to save our country. Every policy must be geared toward that which supports the American worker, the American family, and businesses, both large and small, and allows our country to compete with other nations on a very level playing field, which we never had until I came along and the Trump administration came along. And now we're losing it. They're moving back into China. They're moving back into these other countries. It's horrible. That means low taxes, low regulations, and fair trade, much of which I've already completed, but now will even greatly enhance. Other countries should pay for the privilege of coming into the American marketplace. They have to pay to come into our country and make all of that money, take it away from us. And thanks to the Trump administration, still the best and the biggest country in the world is what we have. We have the best and the biggest. If you remember, for many years, you can look in your projection books, China was going to take over from us as the largest economy in the world in 2018 or 2019. I said, I don't like that timing. and I was with President Xi, who's now president for life. I call him king. He said, no, I'm not the king. I said, yes, you are the king. You're president for life. It's the same thing. But I said, President, you can't do these things. You can't. Remember, they had China 25. That means China was going to take over virtually the whole world economy by 25. I said, that's not a nice sign. I don't want that sign. They took it down. They took down the whole slogan. Probably will be coming back at some point in the near future. But I found it very insulting. I said, I find that very insulting. On day one, we will end Joe Biden's war on American energy. And you will see, when that happens, you will see energy costs come down. And because energy is so big and so important, you will see inflation dropping. You will see it come down. It's a thing of beauty. And you wouldn't think it's that complicated. Now, what has been complicated a little bit is what's happened to so many other things. I believe originally started by this energy disaster. We were $1.87 a gallon for gasoline, and now it's hitting $5, $6, $7, and even $8, and it's going to go really bad. The socialist disaster known as the Green New Deal, which is destroying our country, and the many crippling regulations that it has spawned, will be immediately terminated so that our country can again breathe and grow and thrive like it should. It's very, very much hurting our country. Germany tried it, Germany tried it. They were up for about a year. Remember I sent to Angela. Remember Angela? Do you remember Angela? Nobody's remembering her now. Angela Merkel, I sent her a white flag of surrender. She said, but why do you send this to me, Donald? I said, Angela, I send it to you because this is a flag of surrender. You are getting 78% of your energy from Russia. And when that happens, history has proven that it's not good for Germany. Just take a look over the last 150 years. It hasn't been good. What I didn't know would take place so fast. And Germany closed, as you know, all of its coal-powered plants and its nuclear plants. They closed everything, and now they're building coal plants, and they're building them fast. And China's building a coal plant every week. Every week they open up another, and then they talk about all of the things that they do environmentally. They are watching us die with the Green New Deal, with our windmills and with our solar that doesn't have the power to fire up our great factories and our great plants. They are watching us die, and they're laughing as it happens. Remember, economic security is national security, and that's what it is. We need economic security. That is why we will launch an all-out campaign to eliminate America's dependence on China. We will bring our supply chains, which are a disaster right now. You can't get anything, and good luck getting a turkey for Thanksgiving. Number one, you won't get it, and if you do, you're going to pay 3 to 4 times more than you paid last year. But we will bring our supply chains and manufacturing base back home, as we were strongly doing during the Trump administration, and we will systematically bring back wealth, health, and success to the American middle class and to America itself. Please. Yeah, please sit down. I feel so guilty having you stand. No. No, you've been standing for the whole event. I feel very guilty. I don't want that to happen. To every worker and family struggling to survive in the Biden economy with inflation destroying your family and your life, this campaign will be for you. Help is on the way. Joe Biden has abolished America's borders. We are going to restore and secure America's borders just like we had them before, best ever. We built the wall, and now we will add to it. Now, we built the wall, we completed the wall, and then we said, let's do more, and we did a lot more. And as we were doing it, we had an election that came up. And when they came in, they had 3 more weeks to complete the additions to the wall, which would have been great. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. And that's when I realized that they actually want to have this disaster known as open borders. Hard to believe, isn't it? But one of the reasons we had so much success at the border was because of the fact that two things. We got Mexico to give us free of charge 28,000 soldiers. That helps. And President of Mexico is a great gentleman, by the way. Socialist, but that's okay. He can't have everything. But he's a great man and a great friend of mine. But 28,000 soldiers while we were building the wall. And then when the wall was finished, that's how we set all these records. We have records that nobody can even compete with. Right now, it's a disaster. I believe it's 10 million people coming in, not 3 or 4 million people. They're pouring into our country. We have no idea who they are and where they come from. We have no idea what's happening to our country. We're being poisoned. Within moments of my inauguration, catch and release will be gone forever. Remain in Mexico. Remain in Mexico, which was so important. Everybody came in here, they remained here, and they never left. And you couldn't get them, you couldn't find them. I had a policy, remain in Mexico. And if you think it was easy for me to get the president of Mexico to agree to that, it wasn't. But we got it. And they terminated it, can you believe? So now they come in here, they stay, and we have no idea where they are. They get lost. And it's very dangerous for our country. And again, I'll say, we're going to pay a big price someday for what they're doing. We will begin the process of safely removing the illegal alien criminals that have been unlawfully allowed into our country. We have no choice. We have no choice. And in restoring border security, we will stop the flow of deadly drugs and horrible human trafficking, which both have been set upon us like never before. The human trafficking, you think of it as an ancient thing. It's not ancient. Because of the internet, human trafficking is worse than it's ever been in history. And we stop them at the southern border, which is the #1 port all over the world, the southern border. So much comes through the southern border. #1 port, and we stopped them, and now it's at levels that are many, many, many times what it was just 2 years ago. Biden and the radical left had let loose on this total breakdown of law and order. It was a total breakdown of law and order. I will restore public safety in American cities and other communities that need our help. And if they don't want our help, we're going to insist that they take our help this time. Because, you know, the Democrat governors, these are all Democrat cities. The governors and mayors are supposed to ask for the help, and they would never ask for the help. And yet people are being shot and killed at random like nobody's ever seen before. And we sent in the National Guard in Minneapolis and in other places. In Seattle we went, and we were getting ready to go, and they took over part of the city. And the governors, the Democrats don't want to ever ask to do anything because they don't want to shake things up. In the meantime, the cities are rotting, and they are indeed cesspools of blood. So we're going to go and help them even if they don't want the help. We will give our police back their authority, resources, power, legal protection, and we will give them back their respect. They're great people. And I will immediately launch a no-holds-barred national campaign to dismantle the gangs and clean out the nests of organized street crime. You know, the worst criminals, the worst gangs are MS-13. And under the Barack Hussein Obama administration, they were unable to take them out because their countries where they came from wouldn't take them. And I learned about that in my first day, I actually say. But I learned about it, and I said, which countries? And it was Honduras and Guatemala. It was El Salvador, some others. And I said, how much do we pay them? Sir, you pay them $750 million a year. That's a lot of money. I said, all right, stop payment. We're not paying them anymore because they wouldn't accept them. They would put planes on the runway. So when our plane would come out with these gang members from MS-13, the plane couldn't land because other planes were on the runway. The buses weren't allowed to get through their borders because they had stronger borders than we did by far. They had borders. We don't have borders. They had borders. Other countries that we defend have borders. We defend other countries' borders, but we don't defend our own. But these countries, and I got to know all of the presidents and prime ministers. I got to know them all. And I said, all right, stop payment of the $750 million a year. They won't take them. And you could not get anybody back in because they sent them out. They didn't just come out. They sent them out. They don't want the bad ones. They want to keep their good ones. They don't want the bad ones. These are gang members that will kill, and they like using knives because a knife is more painful Then again, you've read the stories, MS-13. These are savages. They say, oh, please don't use that name. They're people. No, they're not. These are savages. And so we went along, and I said, stop payment of the $750 million. And I get a call the next morning from the presidents of every country that we're talking about. Please don't. Sir, there seems to be a misunderstanding. What's the problem? Is there anything we can do? Yeah, you're not taking your MS-13 gang.
All right. Well, that was President Trump, as we all had expected, announcing his candidacy for 2024 tonight. You know, it was a good speech. He did do some interesting things. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the last segment of the show, because the first thing we got to talk about is obviously what happened in the election. But obviously his line where he once again says America's comeback starts right now. And the part that caught me is, once again, this campaign will not be my campaign. This will be our campaign. And he did, if you caught it, make a clear distinction early on in the address about why he is the only one capable of running in 2024 and taking out the deep state. It was a subtle shot, and he obviously clearly knows that there are people out there that are likely going to declare against him. I think we can all assume the reports coming out that there will be a DeSantis super PAC formed after Thanksgiving by some of the big mega GOP donors. We had Ken Griffin, big mega GOP donor, gave some of the most to Cycle, say that he is not going to support Trump in 2024. We had Rupert Murdoch, Fox News, say he's not going to support Trump in 2024. He actually even said he would support a Democrat, which is ridiculous. It lets you know how far Fox News has fallen. It appears that Rupert's kids have clearly influenced his opinions and his moves going forward. So obviously the likely challengers, I mean, we can assume Mike Pompeo is going to get in this race. He's made that pretty clear. Nikki Haley is likely to get in this race. Ron DeSantis, I hope he doesn't, but it looks like he will. You know, I'd rather have the two not beat each other up and damage each other's brands. I'll explain a little bit more about that too, why it's bad for both to be in there. Glenn Youngkin is also another name out there. And then there's the C squads like Larry Hogan. I mean, he's not going to pull anything. Oh, I forgot about Mike Pence. He's obviously going to run. He made a statement again today or yesterday where he confirmed basically that he's going to run. He said there's going to be better options. Obviously, he's talking about himself. So there's a lot to unravel. I think the president's address, he was very calm. He's very cool. He's very collected. I think some people are saying that the energy wasn't necessarily as high as it normally is, but I think that was part of the design of the speech, to give a calm, cool, even keel and tempered manner so that people, to get that I can be presidential again address. I think some people thought he was going to come out here tonight and just rant and rave and, be angry and bitter and start throwing around personal attacks. So I think that the tone and the manner of the address was by design. I think there's going to be plenty of time for Trump to do those kind of things. And as you can tell, the liberal media is already going crazy. They're not handling it well. The Washington Post literally just tweeted out, I'll read it to you. The twice impeached former President Donald Trump, 76, who refused to concede in the 2020 election and is the subject of multiple criminal investigations, is running again in 2024, increasing the likelihood of a potential rematch with President Biden. So the media is obviously not handling the news well, or maybe they are, because they know they get to now spend another 2 years at least on their constant Trump talk and constant Trump propaganda. Because let's be honest, they can hate Trump all they want, but Trump gives them ratings, gives them viewers. So they might disdain Trump, but they're excited that they get to continue talking about it. So let's focus now a little bit on what happened in this election. So I think a lot of us, sorry, I'm trying to get this put up here. So what happened? I mean, we went into Tuesday. I believed it. I think the polling, even liberal-leaning polls showed us that Republicans were pulling away. I mean, the last polls on the generic ballots, were falling pretty consistently into the R+5, R+6 margin, which actually the popular vote shows that Republicans did win the popular vote. It was an R+6 electorate. So how did the Republicans in an R+6 electorate fail to produce a wave election? All right, because the last time there was an R+5-4 electorate, Republicans won nearly 40 seats. And you should always have a wave when you have a historically unpopular president whose approval rating has consistently hovered around 40%. You have Congress, which is, Nancy Pelosi is one of the most unpopular people in the country. However, we're going to show you a little something else about why I think this happened, because there's some problems with GOP leadership. But there was really no reason to expect that they would be able to thwart a red wave. And immediately, so the results from Florida started coming in and everybody was getting giddy. Massive red wave. Ron DeSantis wins by 20 points. Republicans swept all the competitive House races in Florida. Things were looking awesome. People were excited. The champagne was on ice. And then as the night progressed, we started to clearly see some problems in some very key bellwether districts around the country. And immediately, before it was even known that the red wave was going to fizzle, you had media outlets, Republicans, conservative outlets already dishing out the blame on Donald Trump. It was pretty coordinated attack. I believe it's pretty obvious that this was a coordinated attack. What was going on was, I think, exactly what was designed to happen. And the Republican Party took a lot of things for granted in this election. Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy assumed that with the polling showing an R+6 electorate that did eventually show up, that they were going to have a wave election and that they had quote unquote seats to spare. And some of those seats were in the most competitive districts where you had Trump candidates that made it through the primaries. In some cases, like Joe Kent's seat, where Kevin McCarthy spent $4 million against Joe Kent in the primary. He backed Heidi St. John, an impeacher. They spent $4 million. They sent out mailers basically comparing Joe Kent to Hitler. So I think what Kevin and Mitch McConnell assumed is that they could lose some of those seats where Trump candidates made it through, and they were going to be able to negate that loss because they were going to pick up seats in places like New England. Once again, the Republicans fall for this notion. They get polling in from New England and they assume that, hey, it's so bad, the political climate is so bad for Democrats that we are going to finally be able to get some representatives elected from New England, and it didn't pan out. You had the race, Logan in Connecticut came close, did not work. Hung Chow did not make it through. Fung did not make it through in Rhode Island. So they left wins on the board thinking they were going to have room to spare. And when it became clear that wasn't going to happen, then we get the situation we're in right now where you have Republicans, we need to win in Georgia in the Senate just to hold a 50-50 Senate. And now you're probably looking at a 218, 219, 220 GOP seats in the House, which is a razor-thin majority. It wasn't supposed to be this way. And one of the things that Republican Party needs to wake up to the fact that we really have to talk about here, and I will bring up a quote here. So DC Drano made this quote. The same people say we need to move on from Trump also said Trump needed to move on from the 2020 election fraud, focus on the future. Well, guess what? The same mass mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting fraud tactics used in 2022 just thwarted, I can't say it because I'm on Twitter, or I'm on YouTube, the 2022 red wave. Trump was right the whole time. So what he's saying is mass mail-in voting. Now, listen, I'm going to make a point here because Republicans are going to have to understand this. The GOP, the RNC, I know that they've tried to push ballot harvesting. In California, the California GOP has done well matching the Democrats on harvesting ballots, especially in Southern California. As you can see with the results in the Scott Ball race against Katie Porter, the Mike Garcia, Michelle Steele, Young Kim. But across the nation, Republicans are continually hesitant about this. And I understand the hesitancy. Do I like ballot harvesting? No. Do I believe ballot harvesting should be illegal? Yes. Do I like unsolicited mass mail-in voting? No, especially because voter rolls are unkempt across the country, mostly in places where Democrats hold a substantial majority. So mass mail-in voting, no, should be illegal. The problem is these things are not against the rules right now. These are the new rules. Like them or not, we can't really sit here on our moral high horse and continue to call it fraud and say we're losing because of fraud simply because we don't like the new rules of the game. Okay? It's like if I'm playing football, right? If an NFL team's playing football, a forward pass, and they decide, well, I don't believe forward passes should be part of the game, we're just going to run the ball. That team's going to lose in today's NFL. So you got to throw the forward pass, right? If the other team is playing within the rules of the game and you are sitting there with your moral opposing it saying, well, I don't think the forward pass should be part of the game, we're not going to do forward passes, you're going to get your butts kicked. So right now, in many places, Republicans do not have the ability to change these rules. In a place like California, where the California Supreme Court has upheld ballot harvesting and has upheld unsolicited mail-in voting, these are the rules of the game. It's not fraud when you lose by those rules. There are no moral victories in politics. Okay, you do not get a trophy for losing with dignity and for losing with integrity, so to say. So Republicans are going to have to figure this out. And I've had this debate with Republican voters. I have had this debate with Republican voters this past week. I understand you don't like the new rules, but you have to play by them. Otherwise, you will die by them. Okay? That's the key thing we have to understand. What Democrats did in this election, let me show you something. I'm going to show you something. So there's this one. So Dems lost 5 New York seats that Biden won by more than 20%, including 2 that voted for Biden by double digits. All right, so what happened here is Democrats understood they were behind the 8 ball in competitive districts, but they also understood the new rules of the game because they implemented the new rules of the game. So they spent their money on their ground game, harvesting ballots around the country in the most competitive districts, where you saw things in New York like Staten Island where Republicans swept those seats. Those were D plus 20 seats. So the Democrats didn't spend their resources there because they assumed they were going to be able to still eke those ones out. But because they weren't using their ballot harvesting operations, they weren't focused on those races, they lost those. So that goes to show you just how much the GOP would have won by in competitive districts around the country if we played the game like the Democrats. We have to start taking this seriously. If we continue to hold and sit on our moral pedestal, the Republican Party will be wiped off the face of the map. Conservatives will be wiped off the face of the map because it's not just about the Republican Party. This is about the left's desire to make America a one-party state. And they have substantially altered the rules of the game to make that more likely to happen. So what we have to do is you have to beat them at their own game. We have to out-ballot harvest them. Then we win, and then we can change the rules back once we have power. And I've even had some people criticize me for saying that. Well, why do you want to win if it means that? Listen, you have to decide what you want. Do you want to save this country and save the conservative movement, or do you want to sit at home and say, well, I at least lost with integrity? This country is worth more than sitting home. There are no prizes for losing. And quite frankly, when it is legal and they are the rules of the game, you can disagree with the rule, but it's still the rule of the game. We cannot continue to call it fraud because it's not fraud. Now, there are some states where it's been made illegal. In that case, it would be fraud. But we need to win like they did in Florida, right? What did Ron DeSantis do? He won in 2018, and after 2018, they realized they had a big problem. What was the woman's name in, what's the county there? I can't think. Broward? Is it Broward? One of the counties in Florida where there was always fraud. Ron DeSantis, one of his first acts was to fire the woman that had been there forever. I forget her name. He fired her. He let people know this isn't going to cut it anymore. They fortified their election process, and now they changed the rules to make sure you had integrity in your elections. And I'm not saying voter suppression because that's nonsense. Asking people to show their IDs to vote is not voter suppression. The Constitution says only U.S. citizens can vote. All right? We want to have faith in our elections. So Florida, the Republicans won 2018. Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott in Texas, Brian Kemp in Georgia. They spent time passing new laws, changing the rules of the game back. And that is why they were able to thwart what the Democrats were doing around the country. So we need to win, beat them at their own game, win, change the rules back, or implement election integrity rules that are going to matter. And I want to show you something else. So what else happened? Here, Mitch McConnell spoke today, and of course, he is once again blaming MAGA Republicans. I'm going to tell you why this is not the case again. So let me get the clip from Mitch. I got two clips here. This first one is McConnell. Let's hear what Mitch McConnell had to say, because he is once again scapegoating himself. Ronna McDaniel, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, Tom Emmer, they are all scapegoating for their failures. They don't want to take responsibility because they made stupid decisions thinking they had seats to spare. Let's hear Mitch.
One of the criticisms from Senator Scott and others who agree with him is that your decision not to have an agenda to run on opened up Republican candidates to attacks, that they didn't really stand for anything. What is your response to the criticism that you are partially responsible for?
Every one of our candidates knew what they were for, expressed it quite clearly. It's pretty obvious, and all of you have been writing about it, what happened. We underperformed among independents and moderates because their impression of many of the people in our party in leadership roles is that they're involved in chaos, negativity, excessive attacks, and it frightened independent and moderate Republican voters. And we saw that, which is why you all recall I never predicted a red wave. We never saw that in any of our polling in the states that we were counting on to win. There was no way.
He gave up on seats.
We had national issue set that was favorable, but as a result of our own, the perception many of them had that we were not
once again, he's also
dealing with issues in a responsible way, and that we were spending too much time on negativity and attacks and chaos. They were frightened, and so they pulled back. We, in two states, for example, in two states, for example, got just crushed by independent voters, Arizona and New Hampshire.
Well, maybe it's because Kerry Lake.
So we learned some lessons about this, and I think the lesson's pretty clear.
So that's a bunch of BS from Mitch McConnell. I'll tell you why. One, he just gave two examples. Arizona is the prime one, and Pennsylvania, where they left candidates out to dry to be outspent 10-1. If you don't think that money makes a difference in politics, I don't know what to tell you. It shouldn't be the deciding factor, but many times it is. You have to understand that people are being bombarded with news on the front page of papers, on the television screen, on social media about these candidates, and they're forming opinions based on these candidates. There are a lot of low information voters. So when you constantly berate them with things about Kerry Lake is a white nationalist, she's an election denier, blah, 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 they're going to do that. If you don't put up the equal amount of money, you are going to lose in races like that. That's why everybody focuses on raising money. But Mitch McConnell intentionally cut off funding from those states. Instead, he spent tens of millions of dollars going after a Republican in Alaska who was endorsed by the Alaska Republican Party. So he spent tens of millions of there instead of spending money supporting Blake Masters, supporting Mehmet Oz. He gave money to Oz at the end, supporting who else? There was Blake Masters, Mehmet Oz. So Blake obviously got the worst part of it. But so he took money away from those candidates to go after Republicans. Kelly Tshibaka. All right? That's why those candidates underperformed, because independents were given a perception of these voters, of these candidates, that was not true. And Mitch did not care to combat that. Tens of millions of dollars being outspent does incredible damage. Okay? And then, with independent voters, that's also BS, because all the polling showed going up to the election that independent voters were breaking, in some cases, 3-1, 2-1 for Republicans. He says there was a message. All right, Kevin McCarthy produced the Commitment to America. What was the message from congressional Republicans on the Senate side or on the Senate side or on the House side? Can you tell me what is in the Commitment to America? Can you tell me what is in the Parents' Bill of Rights? Mitch McConnell, that's Kevin McCarthy's side. The Commitment to America was a copy of the 1994 contract with America. Kevin paid Frank Luntz and Newt Gingrich whatever amounts of money to come up with this regurgitated copy, and nobody knew what it was. The only thing the Republican Party did as far as a message was to go out and say, Joe Biden is bad, inflation is bad, we're going to stop it all. No policy positions were presented to voters. Mitch himself said, we don't have an agenda for 2022. And now he's saying that we had an agenda. That's BS. Because 90% of voters, if I went and knocked on their doors and said, tell me what was in the Commitment to America, would have no idea. Tell me what was in the Parental Bill of Rights, they'd have no idea. That's a failure of GOP leadership. And it's a failure that I believe is intentional because they get what they want now. They can stop Biden's agenda with a House majority, right? So now they can stop things. They can slow Biden's agenda. Now you're probably going to have a bunch of rhinos that cave on certain issues and let parts of Biden's agenda still go through. But they can stop Biden's agenda and they can also damage Trump by blaming him for everything. All right, and look at this. So there were actually 13 million less voters, Democratic voters this year than in 2018 where Democrats had a huge blue wave across the country. The problem was there were 1 million less GOP voters because you did not give them anything to get excited about. This is what the establishment does not understand. All right, this is the problem. They desperately want to go back to being a Romney-esque George Bush type party. But what they fail to understand is that platform does not motivate the voters that propelled Trump to a win in 2016. It's not necessarily about Trump himself. You could dislike Trump all you want. It's his platform, his populist platform, that is the winning message. The GOP establishment holds so much disdain for Donald Trump that they are unwilling to accept that his platform is the winning message. If they really wanted to win, they could still take his platform and use it because it does bring out voters. You're never going to get Latino voters that broke for Donald Trump in 2016 to stay with the Republican Party long term by simply not focusing on populism. They came because of America First. Yes, Latino voters share conservative social values. That is true. But at the end of the day, they vote with their pocketbooks. And if they see a Republican Party that once again looks like the party of K Street and Wall Street, which is what Kevin McCarthy wants, which is what Mitch McConnell wants, they are not going to vote Republican. That's not why they came to the GOP in 2016, because I think everyone could agree Donald Trump obviously had, at the time, serious character flaws, right? They were criticizing him, but Latinos didn't care. They liked what he was talking about, securing the border, because they came here legally. And it's unfair to them when our borders are being overrun when they had to follow the legal process. They cared about how Donald Trump was telling them, we're going to create jobs for your family so you can provide for your family. That they voted with their pocketbooks in 2016. All right? So this is something that we saw in the Mark Molinaro special election back a couple months ago. The GOP struggles to get these voters to the polls when Donald Trump is not on the ballot and when they actively oppose MAGA and Trumpism. A political party cannot survive kicking its base in the face. The base is telling you, we want Trumpism, we want Trumpism. And the party leaders like Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, Ronna McDaniel, Tom Emmer are telling the voters, no, you don't get what you want. We tell you the brand of republicanism that you're going to get. Tough luck. Well, guess what? Those voters that Trump brought into the party for the first time ever will disappear and go back to the Democrats, because the Democrats are going to, whether true or not, they're going to their doors in their houses in some cases, because that's what happened here in the 13 districts. The Democrats actually go right into your house especially with Latino and Spanish-speaking voters, and tell you, we are the party of the poor. We're going to help you and your family. We're going to get your jobs. So Republicans are being outmaneuvered all over the place. Ditching Trumpism is not going to make the party win on a national scale. If you look at the seats, look at the electoral map for president, you can see Romneyism, Bushism isn't going to cut it anymore. The GOP must win. Now with Kari Lake losing in Arizona, so the GOP sacrificed 2 important seats. The governorship of Pennsylvania, because Doug Mastriano would have been able to control elections, right? And they screwed Kari Lake, okay, who would have been able to help bring election integrity back to Arizona so we don't have the debacle that's going on, right? So it's very likely you just gave up Arizona for the foreseeable future. And Nevada, the people of Nevada just voted for open primaries and ranked choice voting. No Republican has won under ranked choice voting. Well, I guess you could say Alaska now because Kelly Tshibaka or Murkowski is going to win, and they're both Republicans. But before that, no Republican has won under those systems. Those are 2 vital states you are going to need in 2024, now are at jeopardy of permanently falling into the Democrat column. And a Republican president in 2024, candidate, whomever it is, Trump or no Trump, needs Pennsylvania, needs Arizona, needs Nevada, needs Michigan, needs Wisconsin, even needs to potentially flip Minnesota because Georgia is moving left, even though now it looks like we might be able to take back Georgia. But you have to stick with those states. Ohio, right? Ohio is now a red state because of the America First blue-collar working class platform that Trump gave the GOP. Disconnect Trump's platform with the man himself. The GOP either does this or you're facing you're facing being wiped out. You will be a permanent minority party within the next 10 years. If the GOP continues to take the lessons they're taking from it, we are looking at the high point of the Republican Party right now. The elections coming up in the future are only going to get worse and worse and worse. And now, obviously, like I said, what we saw happening that night is a scapegoat campaign against Donald Trump designed to destroy MAGA. All right. This was a clear effort. I understand there are people. Ron DeSantis, great showing, 20% win. But this narrative that it was all Trump's fault, like we just talked about, is not a serious take. It is a take meant to distract from the failures of what the establishment is trying to do. The establishment does not want to be the party of working class blue collar Americans. To them, to people like Paul Ryan, to people like Mitch McConnell, to people like Kevin McCarthy, these aren't people that they would ever hang out with in real life. These are not people they want to associate with. They believe they are better than these people. Wall Street is also begging them to come back. Please, we do want to be Republican, but we're not going to be Republican under populism. Ken Griffin, who we talked about, one of the biggest GOP mega donors in the country, huge Wall Street guy. He has sat down with Kevin McCarthy and told him, Wall Street wants to come back, but you have to get rid of populism. You need to come back. It's ruining your reputation, the party's brand with Wall Street. So now the GOP establishment is clearly trying to make a decision. They want to pick Wall Street over Main Street. We cannot let that happen. If they succeed at picking Wall Street over Main Street, the Republican Party will die. It will be a permanent minority because all the voters that were brought under the GOP tent will go away. Let's look at some of the people that came out. Let's look at some of the stuff here. I want to show you what Pedro Gonzalez said on Tucker Carlson. Let's see that.
So a lot of people expected not just a red wave on Tuesday, but a red wave among Hispanic voters. But among the many surprises of this week, that did not happen. It happened in Florida. Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio dominated the Cuban vote and even won over traditionally Democratic Puerto Rican voters, it seems like. But more broadly, the Hispanic red wave never materialized. In fact, it receded. In Texas, Latino support for Republicans regressed from past elections. Democrats won most of the seats in the heavily Hispanic Rio Grande Valley. So what is this exactly? Why did this happen, and what does it tell us about the future? Pedro Gonzalez is an associate editor at Chronicles Magazine and joins us tonight. Hey, Pedro, thanks for coming on. How do you interpret this? I know it's only a few days ago, but what do you make of it?
Well, Tucker, Latinos are not a monolith. Cubans in Florida don't think and vote the same way as Mexicans in California. What we can say is Republicans improved in some places, but Democrats seem to still maintain a holdover majority Latino support across the country. But these people are persuadable. They can be moved. But what was the GOP's ground game ahead of midterms? I think it's important to reflect on this. Democrats do outreach in key places. They spend millions rewriting voting rules and regulations in their favor. The priority, on the other hand, of the political machine around Kevin McCarthy was to target America First candidates like Joe Kent in Washington and Anthony Sabatini in Florida because they were viewed as threats to his power. What was the GOP's vision, its promise to Americans? Kevin McCarthy said entitlement reform. In other words, cuts to Social Security and Medicare would be a top GOP priority after midterms. And also, of course, getting another $50 billion for Ukraine by January. So we cut grandma's Social Security check and we mail it to Zelensky, right? It's not hard to see why Republicans were underwhelming, not just with Latinos, but other persuadable voters when you have this kind of leadership. But this is also, Tucker, why I'm not pessimistic, because when you have Washington generals like this running the party, you can't really say that we've begun to fight.
Well, I think that's exactly right. So if you were going to make this is a long conversation. I hope we come back for another hour. But if you could distill the message that works, not just to Latino voters, but just to working class voters, what would it be?
That America is not a bazaar. It's not an open air marketplace for the world to plunder. It's a home to a real people. It's a home that that it's a home to a real flesh and blood people. And that means that we have an obligation to keep our communities safe. We have an obligation to secure our border. We have an obligation to not just post memes about how Biden and the Democrats have failed on crime, but to actually do something, propose solutions, instead of just adopting the Democratic Party's policies on crime and then just reframing them as somehow fiscally conservative or America first, which is what the GOP has done historically. How about being an anti-war party, or in this case, anti-nuclear war? The reason that the GOP couldn't talk about this, of course, is because the party leadership actually is pro-war. But the thing about the war in Ukraine is that you can connect it to everything from the cost of fuel in your car to the rising cost of food on your table. But again, Republicans are frankly cowards and we're not willing to take on this issue.
Exactly. Pedro hits the nail on the head. A lot of things. The Republican Party is insincere in what they're marketing to voters. This whole plot to destroy MAGA is coordinated. They want to shift away from Trumpism, and they saw this. One of the things they did in the primaries, like he talked about, was do incredible amount of damage to these MAGA candidates that ended up struggling when they got to the general. I talked a little bit about Joe Kent. You had Caroline Leavitt in New Hampshire. You had, trying to think other ones. Oh, J.R. Majewski, left him out to dry. They didn't give him a penny, right? Based off some stupid hit piece that was done by the AP that they didn't even take the time to verify. So they brutally beat up their own candidates in the primaries, right? And then in some cases, in Joe Kent's case, in Caroline Leavitt's case, in J.R. Majewski's case, these candidates then went to the general, but they were already damaged by the stain and the cloud of what Kevin McCarthy and his allies said about them to voters. When you compare somebody like Joe Kent, when you send out dozens of mailers telling people that Joe Kent is basically a socialist, he's Bernie Sanders, he's Adolf Hitler, if you don't think that that is going to hurt him in the general election, I don't know what to tell you. These candidates did not lose because of MAGA. They lost because they were drastically underfunded, and they were already compromised after the primary because of attacks from their own party. The GOP is worse to their own candidates in primaries than they are to Democrats. I'll get to your question, Brian. This is a huge problem. And then you have people already going around, Tom Cotton jumping off, blaming Trump, Mitch McConnell blaming Trump. Why hasn't Kevin McCarthy, if he backs Donald Trump for 2024, why hasn't Kevin come out and immediately supported him? Because Kevin is waiting to see how the chips fall. We're going to talk about that in this last segment. But the Republican Party has to understand this. If you destroy MAGA, if you destroy America first, you might be able to win in the suburbs. You might get some of those highly educated voters you crave so dearly back, but they're not going to be enough on a national scale, and they're not going to be enough in competitive districts where the demographics of this country are radically changing. You have to focus on the largest growing portion of the electorate, which is the working class, which is Latinos. It's not just Latinos. Working class voters and Latinos. Look at the 2020 census. That is where America is growing. And that is where populism appeals to, right? Populism appeals to the working class. If you abandon it, you will lose every gain you made, and you will die as a party. And the fact that so many in the GOP are now running around eager to go back shows you that they don't get it. Let me show you what Matt Gaetz said on what the new conference should look like. Because he laid out a vision. Matt Gaetz gave you a vision. Let's see what Gaetz said GOP should do.
I believe that no member of Congress, by House rule, should be allowed to accept a donation for their campaign from a federal lobbyist or a federal political action committee. That money all has strings attached to it, and anybody who tries to tell you otherwise is lying. And when members take hundreds of thousands of dollars from lobbyists and PACs, they work for them more than they work for their constituents. And guess what? I intend to offer that amendment on the House floor in January, and I already have Democrats ready to vote for it, maybe even all of them. The second thing I would suggest is that if someone is a member of Congress, they should be prohibited from lobbying for life. Why is it so hard to say that you should choose one side or the other to be on? You're either in the law-making game or you're in the influence peddling game. And those who choose to be in the influence peddling game, go ahead, but you should sacrifice that when you get the privilege to represent 750,000 people. I intend to offer that amendment on January 3rd, and I expect that there will be Democrats voting for it. I will also introduce an amendment to have a ban on members of Congress trading individual stocks. How can we say that that is not something that dilutes our trust in markets and in governance when people are essentially able to bet on the outcomes that they have an ability to somewhat control? And I expect Democrats to vote for that. And finally, I would observe something that has really worked well in the state of Florida, a single subject rule. A bill coming to the floor should only deal with one subject. I was incensed as a freshman when I had to vote on the Farm Bill and whether or not to authorize war in Yemen in the same vote. And we could still have broad bills that relate to insurance or education or appropriations, but the notion that we lash all these things together does not serve our constituents and the American people. And I would expect, if we're in the majority, Democrats will vote for my amendment for a single subject rule.
Everything Matt Gaetz just said is the kind of positions the Republican Party needs to take but is too afraid to do because they are enriching themselves on those things. Ban on stock trading. Ban on becoming lobbyists. The single subject rule is one of the greatest things I have seen proposed by a Republican ever. Those are the kind of issues that are going to bring people into the Republican Party. Those positions will bring people to the Republican Party that had never been there before. All right? They're not used to hearing Republicans talk like that because think about it. He made a great point. This is how politicians funnel money on pet projects. You get a bill that's so-called a farm bill, or you get the funding of the government bill, the omnibus spending bill, bills that need to be passed, that if you vote against them, like they did with the veterans bill a few months ago, right? You saw the burn pit bill where the Democrats attached tons and tons of pet projects into the veterans burn pit bill, and Republicans killed it, and then the media attacked them. How can you vote against helping our veterans? Those are political strategies used in Washington. The bill should have been just for veterans and burn pits, and every Republican would have supported it. But politicians try to attach things that are not necessarily popular with voters to bills that need to be passed, or that they will get great flack for not voting for. And it gets things passed that is not popular, like Ukraine aid, right? Tying Ukraine aid to bills that need to be passed. If Republicans are bold enough to take some of the stances that Matt Gaetz just said, that is how you win in the future. That is the kind of party that will resonate with the American people. The little guy versus the big guy. The little guy in America is struggling right now. They're having difficulty paying for gas. They're having difficulty paying for groceries. They're having difficulty paying their mortgages, paying their rent. They do not want to hear a party or vote for a party that wants to cater to Wall Street. They want a party that tells them, I am going to fight for you even if we get flack, even if it's unpopular. I am your fighter. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I think Republicans, we had 1 million less Republican voters. Because look at what has happened over the course of the last 6 months. Merrick Garland, Joe Biden, and his FBI and DOJ have run around the country like maniacs, rounding up pro-life conservatives. And no one in GOP leadership said anything. Why would you vote for a party that will not fight for you? If you cannot trust people to fight for you, why would you show up and give them your votes? This is a failure of Republican leadership. The one thing you could say about Donald Trump, you heard it in his address tonight, is that he is going to stand up there and take the bullets for the American people. He is not going to be silent. He is going to fight, even if it gets him constantly ridiculed, destroyed, and defamed by the media, by the left, and by people in his own party, because it's the right thing to do. That's why I ran for Congress. I don't care about getting political power. I don't care about putting the Republican Party over the people of America. I care about helping the American people. I'm going to take the positions that I believe will be in the best interest of the American people, regardless of whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. This is about helping people. Politics should be about people. It should not be about power. It should not be about lobbyists. It should not be about helping Wall Street make more billions. The economic calamity that's coming, we haven't seen the worst of the economic crisis. Mass layoffs are starting. You had FedEx announce they're going to cut 10,000 workers before the Christmas holidays. When have you ever heard a shipping company say they're laying off workers before the Christmas holidays? That is not a good omen. And to me, it is more important to stand up for people that you represent than it is to stay loyal to a political party or political leadership if they're not going to fight for the people. The people are more important than parties. And that is why the battles in GOP leadership are so important right now. And they're going to tell us a lot. They already told us today about what's going to happen, the future of the Republican Party. Only in politics, right? Only in government can you fail miserably and earn a promotion. And that is exactly what the Republican Party did today, or signaled that they want to do. They nominated Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. Now, he lost 31 votes, so he might not be Speaker. And I want to talk a little bit about Marjorie Taylor Greene on this, because I'm disappointed. I like Marjorie, but I'm very disappointed she's shilling for Kevin right now. And I think Donald Trump needs to also explain why he still supports Kevin, because I know personally that Kevin is going around plotting behind his back. The McFailures squandered an election. That's what Matt Gaetz called them. They squandered an election, and now they are going to be promoted. What message does that send to the American people who voted for the Republican Party? What message does that send to GOP voters? That the party does not care. That the party is okay with failure. You are already dejecting your base as you gear up for 2024. Let's look at what Matt Gaetz had to say. First, I want to play Marjorie Taylor Greene because I want to point something out about what she had to say. Because she came out in support for Kevin McCarthy, and I need to tell you why it's not true.
And politics is a blood sport. And because it is so difficult and you have to fight as hard as possible, and Steve, you know what that's like, we have to dig in sometimes, and we have to do everything we can to stop our enemy. And the enemy is the Democrat Party. That's the enemy of America, because they are destroying our country and selling us out. And so this is why our conference has to unify. And I say this, Andy Biggs is one of my dearest friends. I love him to death. Matt Gaetz, closest ally, somebody I trust all the time. All of these people that are involved in this challenge are my friends. And if, Jake Sherman wants to call it the MTG wing of the party, so be it. But I'm also willing to step out, and I know the ground. I know how it works on the inside and the outside. And we have to put someone in for Speaker that is going to be elected and not allow the Democrats to pull away one or two because that's what they want to do. And they can do it. Believe me, it can be done. We have Republicans in there that would possibly make a deal, as hard as that is for people to believe.
Okay. I want to say this to Marjorie Taylor Greene. There is still time to change your position because it's not true. And whatever Kevin McCarthy is promising you in terms of committee assignments, it's not worth it. Because the fact is the Republican Party does not control the Senate, does not control the White House. Okay? So what the Republicans are going to be able to accomplish in the next 2 years is not very little. The best they're going to be able to accomplish is to thwart Biden's agenda, but they're not actually going to be able to get much done because everything's going to be vetoed or die in the Senate. So whatever Kevin McCarthy is promising you isn't enough. A soul is a powerful thing to lose. Once you lose it, you never get it back. And what she's telling you is that, we have to support Kevin McCarthy because we have to have somebody who's going to win for speaker. Otherwise, the Democrats, we're going to have rhinos side with the Democrats and elect Liz Cheney or some other Democrat like Nancy Pelosi. That's not going to happen. It didn't happen in 2016. People forget Kevin McCarthy was set to become Speaker of the House in 2016, but he didn't have the votes. So what did the caucus have to do? They had to compromise. The Freedom Caucus stopped Kevin McCarthy in 2016, and they compromised on Paul Ryan. So he instead got the nod, and he became the Speaker of the House. The same thing will happen here. If it becomes apparent, because look, Kevin didn't even break 200 today. 31 Republicans voted against Kevin. The best he's going to have is 220 seats in the House. If it becomes apparent in December and as they go into this vote that Kevin McCarthy does not have the votes needed, the Republican caucus is going to have to sit down and they will compromise on a new candidate. That's how it would work. Politics is about being shrewd. And I guarantee Kevin told her to say that because people have fallen for it. It's not going to happen. It is a scare tactic by a desperate Team McCarthy. There are plenty of compromise candidates that the Freedom Caucus and the rest of the Republicans would unite behind. Thomas Massie, Jim Jordan, Andy Biggs. There's people you can find that can better represent the Republican Party than Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Ronna McDaniel blew this election. To make them your face, the face of your party, is illogical. Let's look at something. I want to show you exactly something. Show you. The Speaker of the House and the leader in the Senate are going to be the face of the Republican resistance. And you have two historically unpopular individuals in Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. They're actually more unpopular than Nancy Pelosi. How can you excite Republican voters and the country and get people to come into your party when the face of your party for the next 2 years, the faces of your party, can't even break 30% in popularity? We have to show the people that we lost and we're willing to take accountability, because right now I see no accountability at the top of the GOP, at the top of the RNC. All I see is scapegoating of Donald Trump and Trumpism because they don't like it. Because they don't want to be the party of the American people. They want to be the party of Wall Street and lobbyists. People need to understand there's a lot of money in being a minority party. And unfortunately, right now in the United States of America, we have a great country that is being run by corrupt individuals on both sides of the aisle. Politics naturally draws in the worst amongst us because you gain power, you're ego-driven, and unfortunately, those people get to Washington and they do things for their own benefit over the benefit of those who sent them there. And once they get in, they're nearly impossible to get out because, as you see, the flow of money. Your own party will spend tens of millions to get rid of you, to make sure that people don't get there to challenge them. Kevin McCarthy spent the last 2 years counting votes for speaker, not counting seats in Congress. And now he gets a small majority that he believes he can control. Because if J.R. Majewski got there, if Joe Kent got there, if Caroline Levitt got there, if John Gibbs got there, those people would have been a thorn in his side. So it was better to let them lose than to have them get to D.C. It was better for Mitch McConnell to let Blake Masters lose, to try and get rid of J.D. Vance in the primaries. It was better for them to do that than to let them get to Washington and cause problems for them and break their grip on control. These people care more about their own power. American people are struggling. And this is the most unfortunate thing. We need leaders who care more about the people than they do about themselves. So I do want to get into one segment before we get some question and answers. The biggest L, I did this new segment. So I find things on the internet and I say it's the biggest loss of the week. This week it's going to go to, unfortunately, the voters in Pennsylvania. Because now 2 elections in a row, you have voted for a candidate, Joe Biden said it, and now Josh Shapiro confirms it, who has vowed to destroy your livelihood. Immediately after winning, Josh Shapiro comes out and says he is going to put more restrictions on fracking and natural gas. 500,000 jobs in Pennsylvania and nearly $80 billion of the state's economy depend on those 2 industries. 2 elections in a row, the people of Pennsylvania voted for candidates who are going to destroy their own livelihoods. And in no place other than do Democrats have it mastered with ballot harvesting than in places like Pennsylvania, where you have Democratic machines in Philadelphia. Places like Philadelphia, like Pittsburgh, those are Democratic machines. They are the masters of getting votes. Making sure. One of the things the Republican Party needs to understand, you could have all the voters in the world, but voters no longer matter. Ballots matter. You could have as many voters on your side, but if they do not show up on election day, it doesn't matter. That is why we have to stop counting on showing up on election day, because things like what happened in Arizona, right, where suddenly, what have Republican voters told the Democrats for years? We're going to show up on election day. You're telling the other side what you're going to do. So then you show up on election day and 20% of the machines don't work. And you only have 8 hours to make sure those people vote. Whereas if you beat the Democrats at their own game, you have 30 days to get ballots in. Ballots matter, voters don't. We have to give up on this plan of waiting till election day with only 8 hours to make sure you get the votes in, because these things are going to continue happening. We're going to have situations because, look, it's not voter suppression when how many people were disenfranchised in Arizona? And the Democrats have said nothing. The party of being against voter suppression does not care that tens of thousands were likely, 10,000 or so were likely disenfranchised in Maricopa County. But it doesn't matter because those were Republican voters. This kind of stuff is going to continue to happen. These technical glitches will continue to happen if we tell these people that we are just showing up on election day. Would you rather have 30 days to bank votes? Or do you want just 8 hours? Do you want to keep having the stress of having to play catch up? Or do you want to go into election day knowing that you have votes in the bank? That is why these Democrats are so confident. People like Josh Shapiro say they're going to win. They're so confident because they know they have votes already banked. They have tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of votes already in the bank prior to election day. Many of these elections are already lost by the time election day comes around. We have to wake up to the reality of the game, and we have to play by the rules of the game. Otherwise, we're going to get wiped out. So before we end, I'd like to take some questions. If anyone's still watching and wants to ask questions, otherwise we'll prepare for next week. But let's shoot away. And you got, oh, let me go to the chat. Sorry, I was, oh, do I trust? I don't know. Machiavellian realist. At this point, this is one of the things that has me really upset. I think, listen, like I said, which MAGA candidate is going to want to step up? If you know you are going to get eviscerated by Kevin and his allies in 2024, Donald Trump needs, it's clear he's going to face a primary challenge, right? He needs allies running at the same time in 2024. But why would a MAGA candidate, a Trump loyal candidate, step up to run knowing that they are going to get destroyed by Kevin? They're going to lose their money. They're going to lose their reputation. Why would they do it? If Trump is backing the guy who's actively hurting people who are loyal to him, they're not going to do it. So Trump needs to abandon Kevin. Is he going to do it? I don't know, but he needs to wake up and realize that sticking with Kevin is going to do more harm than good. He needs to keep his base. He needs to keep his loyal supporters. Kevin McCarthy did terrible things to people in the primaries. What they did to Joe Kent is a disgrace. The man was a 20-year Green Beret. His wife was killed in action defending this country, and they said the most awful things about him just to protect a swamper like Heidi St. John who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Look at what they did to Joe Kent. But Joe Kent loves this country, so he will probably run again. But many won't. Many won't. We're getting on to Washington State political watch. Let's talk about that. What's my reaction to Joe Kent losing? It's unfortunate. And they're blaming Joe Kent for being a MAGA Republican. But it's not. $4 million was spent by the Republican Party against Joe Kent in the primary. They made him out to be a socialist, a monster, basically. They killed their own candidate because they thought they were going to get Heidi St. John over the finish line. But when Joe Kent won, he was already mortally wounded by his own party by the time the general came around. That's why he lost. It turns out when you spend months telling voters in a congressional district that somebody is Hitler, they tend to not want to vote for them when the general comes around. I don't know. I mean, that seems pretty basic to me. I don't know how people can't figure that out. Steve asks, Convention of the States. I think we do. I mean, in what term? Like, what do you want out of the Convention of the States? What are you looking to get out of it? Because, I mean, I think I would love a Convention of the States, but I want to know what the agenda is going to be when we get it. Obviously, I think we should ban mass mail-in voting. We have to come up with things. So I do support a Convention of the States, but I want to know what the agenda item is going to be. Anyone else got anything for me? I like the questions. We're good. Sorry, I'm looking at Getter because I can't see Getter on the comments. Don't come up on Getter on my feed, so I need to check the phone to see if anybody is watching there. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, man. The GOP mortally wounded many of their candidates by the time the general came around. Anybody else got any comments, questions? Give me some feedback. I think we had a good show tonight. I think the president, people are going to say his energy wasn't there, but that was by design. He's showing you he can be calm, cool, and collected. I think what you heard from the president is that he's going to be a formidable opponent. He is not going to back down. These people that are saying he's going to back down, it's not going to happen, that he should pass the torch. Listen. We know Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not passing the torch, okay? Get it out of your head. There's going to be a primary. And I do want to mention this. Why I don't want Machiavellian real. Should we still support Trump? Right now, yeah, we should. Let me tell you why I back Donald Trump. He does need to show some faith in the people who support him, though, and he has to cut ties with Kevin. It is not going to help him. Kevin is going to whisper sweet nothings in his ear, but all the while, he is going to be working and maneuvering behind his back. Ken Griffin, who helps fund Kevin McCarthy's CLF, is actively pushing for Ron DeSantis. Kevin is going to tell Trump he's with him until he's not, until the time comes for Kevin to stick the dagger in your back, Donald Trump. I am begging you. You have to cut ties with him. It is in your best interest. Forget about his money. One, how much money would Kevin have raised if he wasn't using your name and likeness to raise that money? He used loyalty to you and your movement to raise his tens of millions of dollars. He wouldn't have done it on his own. He didn't before he attached himself to you. And what good is his money if he is going to use that money against you? Because that's what he's going to do. Behind the scenes, he is using his influence, his money against you. He's destroying the people that stood up for you and fought for your movement. But why do I support Trump? Because I trust that Trump is the only one who is going to stand. He doesn't need the deep state. Listen, the age-old saying, money talks. I like Ron DeSantis, but I am concerned by the people who are pushing him to run and the people that are vowing to fund him. They are not the type of people that are going to that want the swamp drained. They are the type of people that want the swamp to live on forever. They are so desperate to stop Trump because they know that if Trump gets in there, he's going to be like a wrecking ball. And there is no Republican that I see right now outside of Donald Trump that has the guts to stay true to their movement and their promises. And that's why there is no one else right now besides Donald Trump. He has proved to us that he is willing to take the bullets and stay true. But he has to show his supporters that he has learned his lessons. The worst mistakes Donald Trump made in the White House were personnel decisions. And he made those mistakes by taking the advice of people like Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, and Mitch McConnell. And whatever else, Swamp Rat, Reince Priebus. Those people gave him bad advice. They told him to appoint bad people to power. That is a big concern I have. He needs to show us he learned that mistake. That he is not going to listen to those people anymore. And if he sticks with Kevin, he's showing me a little bit that he hasn't learned that mistake because Kevin is not doing you any favors. So, I think we have to put pressure on Trump and his people to make the break. We must. I grew so much more respect. I always liked Matt Gaetz, but I grew so much more respect for him today and in the last couple of days because that is a man who they have tried to publicly humiliate, defame, slander. They've set the FBI on him. And he is standing up fighting for us. We need more Matt Gaetzes and less Kevin McCarthy. What do we do then? Brian, like I said, we have to show them that we are not willing to accept it. We have to voice our disapproval. Listen, sometimes to break the establishment, you got to let them take some losses. If we keep giving in to them and accepting the garbage they throw our ways, they're always going to have power. They're already taking the wrong lessons out of 2022. They believe it's because of Trump and MAGA they lost. They lost because people saw through their act. You can tell when someone is genuine and when someone is not. Voters see this. Simply regurgitating America First talking points doesn't mean you're actually MAGA and America First. Actions speak louder than words. And in many cases, the actions of these people who pretend to be MAGA, who pretend to be American First, show that they're not. And voters are smart enough to realize they're being lied to, they're being played by con men, by frauds. I really appreciate you guys watching. I didn't get the results I wanted out of my primary. I would have loved to go there and fight for the American people. To me, politics is not about a political party at this point. Politics is about helping the American people. And I want to help Democrats and Republicans alike. And I believe conservative populism is the best way to do that. Exactly. You're right, Brian. They didn't necessarily fix it. What they did, Brian, is they focused on the competitive districts. They put their ground operations to the max in the most competitive districts around the country to negate the red wave. And they neglected places like New York, especially in California, because they assumed they had those in the bag. So they weren't harvesting ballots and doing their ground operations as much in those places, which is why Republicans squeaked through. Whereas in the competitive districts, That's where they spent their time making sure they banked those votes. And that should be a warning to the GOP. It's not because of Trump. It's because you got outmaneuvered on the ground. The Republican Party is running campaigns like we're still operating under the old rules. The rules have changed. It's just like I made with the football analogy. If you said, well, I don't think forward passes should be legal in the NFL, so we're not going to run them, you're going to get your butt kicked. The rules have changed. Play by those rules. Then, once you get the power, you take it back, you change the rules back. All right, so I appreciate you guys tonight. Thank you for watching. Next week, I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about it. Brian, yeah, I'm really worried about it. I think the president, like I said, which, before I let you go, say it. Oh, John, I would love to help out, but Kevin is going to try and squash me no matter. Listen, John, I appreciate you saying I would love to do something to help people. I really want to. I don't want to get involved with politics to get rich. If I were to go to Washington, I would never trade a stock. I made that vow. Neither me, my family will trade no stocks. I don't want to be in politics to get rich. I want to help people because I'm worried about the future of this country. I want to make sure that there is an America for our children. The America that we grew up loving exists tomorrow. That is my priority. It's never been about politics. So I do want to stay involved. Unfortunately, I had a choice to make after the primary. They wanted me to, they spent $1 million slandering me, calling up voters, telling them I was endorsed by teachers unions, telling them I was in favor of CRT. They called up voters, telling them I was a carpetbagging liberal from Connecticut who couldn't hold a teaching job. They called up my campaign worker and told him to quit working for me or he'd never work again. This was a kid, 23 years old, Latino. His parents are immigrants. He was the first in his family to graduate from college. And they told him if he continued to work for me, he would never work again. So they wanted me to forget all of that and basically help them elect somebody who I don't believe is in it for the right reasons. I cannot, regardless of party, Democrat or Republican, I cannot publicly support someone for office that I don't believe is doing it for the right reasons and who is going to behave in the right way when they get there. I can't do that. I can't tell people to vote for someone that I wouldn't vote for. And so I made a choice to speak up because I believe the truth is more important than getting powers. Because they said, what do you want to run for next? And to me, so they're going to come for me, but I don't intend to shut up. I intend to keep fighting. I appreciate that a lot of you have shown faith in me and have encouraged me to fight. If I see an opportunity, I'm going to go for it. I expect them to try and crush me again. But I hope I'll have your guys backing because, like I said, this to me is not about power. I want to make sure that the America of tomorrow or the America of yesterday still exists tomorrow and that future generations grow up in the greatest country in the world. All right? Because right now, America is in crisis. So I appreciate you guys. I thank you again. Next week, I hope you guys join me. I hope everyone has a blessed evening. Stay strong. Keep the faith. We're going to win this. The only way out is through. See you next week.
What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair, everybody going to my mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. I'm going to lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I heading? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising and with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's why reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to flip him. We're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway, my mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. I'm going to lose going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the door? My mind's going